morning, everybody. Welcome to another round of Coffee and Question. What's today's topic? I had a couple of requests on one of the forums where it's like, well, I don't understand how to start when we're talking about hand carving bowls or when you put them on your lathe or anything like that. It seems like a very difficult process to go through. It's not. So I'm going to do this in steps. I'll make short videos and I'll show you each step I go through, and it's just really not that hard. But I want to start off with a diagram here. Let's take a look. I'll try to zoom in here so that you can see this. And what you're looking at is, if I'm looking at a log, like right from the top down that you just cut, the very center, and it'll become apparent when you look at it, there's a dot there. Now that dot is called the pith. Okay, and then there are rings around it that are usually a little bit discolored, let's say. Now that's called the heartwood. Okay, and so you'll get some checking. If it's more than just like cut that day, you're gonna get some checking there. They call it wing split. Now, I just call it checking or cracking to keep things simple. And then after that, you see all these rings. Those are the growth rings. And it comes all the way to the outside. Well, that's the bark. So these are the basics of a piece of wood when you're looking at it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to explain to you how I cut it and how I go about getting it ready, to work with. Now, each piece of wood that I look at, I think about what do I want to make? Do I want to make a bowl? Do I want to make like a weed pot? Do I want to make a vessel? What do I want to make out of it? So when I have that piece of wood sitting up to cut it, I just think about what do I want to do with it, and that's the way I begin to proceed. So let's just talk about, you have the Warrior or you have the cut saw, and they're on your 4.5-inch angle grinder, and you want to hand carve a bowl. Now, for bowls and for hand carving, I'll show you what I'll do. Okay, I would just turn around and I would find where the pith is. Okay, that's at dead center, and I'll show you on a piece of wood here in a minute just to make it easier to understand. And I would just take my chainsaw and on its side, and I would turn around and I would cut that log all the way through. Now, what I'm going to end up with is I'm going to end up with 2 pieces of wood I can make 2 bowls out of. So let me show you. Kind of like this, okay? You're gonna get a bowl out of this side and a bowl out of this side. Now, cutting it down the middle right here through that pith, if you're gonna do hand carving, it's not gonna matter because all of this is gonna be cut out. Now, if I'm gonna cut these and I'm gonna store them for a longer period of time before I get to them, I'm gonna do this a little bit differently. This is where people get a little confused. Here's the pith. Now it's going to crack almost 100% of the time right there at that pith. And you can't stop it usually, but you can control the cracking, and I'm going to explain to you how. I usually will come in on a log. I'm looking down at it. Here's the pith, and I know it's going to start to check out here and crack. Well, I come in over, well, let's say 3/4 of an inch to an inch on each side like this. And I run my chainsaw and I cut that out. So I'm cutting out this whole inner center section. Now, if you make pen sleeves or you're making handles for knives or you're doing something else, this centerpiece, if you stay away from this pith a little ways, like this becomes firewood here. This is just not of any use. But these pieces that you're left with here, they're really stable, and they come out really well for projects, but they're going to be small projects probably, okay, because you don't have these monstrous, round logs that you're working with. You just, tree branches and recently cut trees, and they're just not that big. So I would cut this out, okay, and then what you're left with is this. I still got my 2 bowls, blanks, that I can use. And I go, okay, now that's pretty cool. All right, so I've got 2 nice bowl blanks. Now, while I have it set up on those logs, sometimes I will take and I'll cut this off here. Okay, like this, and like this. And that'll become the bottom of the bowls, and I go ahead and I cut those. because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to seal these. Okay, now when you seal these, there are a lot of different ways. People put them in brown paper bags, throw sawdust and shavings in there, bundle them up, date them, look at them, and let them dry very slowly over a long period of time. Now that is one technique. I've tried it. Yes, it does work. I've gotten varying results from doing it that way. Another one is you want to coat the end grain with something. Okay. The end grain's here on this, and it's all this whole face right here. This is all end grain right through here, like this. This is all end grain. Same thing on this blank. It's all end grain. So there isn't 100% guarantee it'll never crack, but what it will do is it will slow it way down, and it will dry very, very slowly, and that improves the chances that these things are going to crack on you. Okay, so what are you going to seal it with? Now, people have tried latex paint, so have I. It works marginally okay. I've also coated the ends of it with wax. You melt some wax in a container, and I put wax on there. Now that works, but I found it to be kind of a pain in the butt, to prepare the wax and put it on. Okay, so what are some other ways? You can wrap the ends of these with cellophane, just cellophane. Don't wrap the whole thing. You'll promote mildew and all this other stuff. So you just the end grain, so you just wrap the cellophane around each side covering the end grain. Now that works fairly well. Not perfectly, but it does work fairly well. Now the other way you can do this is to coat it with anchor seal, and I'll leave a link below. Now the logging industry uses anchor seal, and they coat the ends of the logs after they're cut, and they send them to the mill and so forth for the same reason. It slows way down the checking and cracking. So anchor seal is a good choice. It's not that expensive. I can't find it anywhere in the local stores, so I buy it online and I have it shipped. Now, the other method, which works really well, almost as good as the anchor seal, almost as good. Out at any of the supply stores, you can buy Elmer's glue, the white stuff. I buy it by the gallon. I bring it home, I put it in a container, and I just put a little water, not much, just a little bit of water. I mix it up, make it just a little bit thinner. Then I use those throwaway brushes that you can buy out at Harbor Freight. They're about 50 cents each, something like that. Or you can go to the dollar store and get a 4 or 5 pack for $1, because I don't want to fool around cleaning up the brushes after dipping them in glue. So I use those brushes and I coat the end grain. I let it dry for like 20-30 minutes, and then I coat it again. Now, whether I use anchor seal or Elmer's glue, I always put 2 coats on. And I had somebody drop a comment that's unnecessary, Okay, but this is what works for me. If that's what works for you, I think that's fine. So those are 2 methods that you can use to seal these. Then what do I do? Well, I put them inside for a while, but that wasn't going real well here at home, so I put them on the garage floor in the back of my garage. It's in the shade, but it still gets kind of warm in here. But I seal them and I stack them, so it's got a little bit of gap, so you got a little bit of air movement there. I've had excellent luck doing it this way. I won't tell you that every piece didn't end up with some checking or cracking, but very few, okay? And I let them sit there, and I let them sit until I can get around to using them as a project. So these are the basics of what I do, and this is what works for me in preparing these blanks. Okay, now let's talk about a couple of ways to cut these that aren't so straightforward. Here I have this log, and I have it set in on like an angle to show you in the picture. And here is the end of the log. Here's one side, here's the other. So let's say in one side that pith is kind of dead center, but let's say on the opposite side it's a little off. And I want to cut this because I want to seal them, and I want to stack them to the side for the future, but I don't want that pith in there that we talked about, or I go straight down through it. Either way. So what I would do is I would make a notch here with my chainsaw when I'm cutting it, and I would notch it here with my chainsaw in the center of the pith on both ends. Then this is my guide with my chainsaw. Then I just take my chainsaw and I cut it like that. and that will cut it right down through the middle of the pith on both ends. So I've seen guys do these elaborate measurements and all this stuff online. You don't have to do that. If you just make a little notch here where the center of the pith is, same thing on the other side, run your chainsaw through it, you're going to be fine. So that works. Then you can turn around and cut these any way you want to prepare them. Now, let's talk about another way to look at it. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a branch, and it goes both to the right and to the left, and you can see the grain pattern by looking at the arrows. What makes this interesting is it's like being an archaeologist. You can uncover, and it's usually got a spectacular way of looking. And so if I wanted to carve a bowl, and I want that sweeping grain, and you can see it sweeps right, left, and that's the way that it branches like that. So I want that centerpiece, so I would draw a circle like a bowl, and I would draw it around, and the dotted lines are where I would cut it using my chainsaw. So this pattern, this sweeping pattern, is what I'm after, and most of the time, like I said, you'll get a spectacular grain pattern out of it. So I always get excited when you see these kinds of pieces of wood and you're able to cut that circle out of it. And these dotted lines, like I said, these are where I would cut it. And then I could cut off the excess here, cut off the excess here, get it a little bit more in shape, you know, for carving with those Kutzall or the Warrior brand, you know, hand carving discs with that 4.5-inch angle grinder. So this would be a nice piece right here to be able to carve out into a bowl, and you'd have a really, really nice grain pattern to it. So this is some thoughts. I mean, when I look at these branches, if I can get this section out of it without a lot of cracking, checking, or anything going on, I mean, it just makes a really nice piece. So, and I use a compass or just a round circle of anything that I have to kind of give me an idea of how to cut it out of there. This is another way, I mean, that you can approach these pieces of wood in these projects. So give me just a second, we will keep going. One more. Okay, here's something else I go through when I have a log up there, is like, do I want to make a vessel or a weed pot or something like that? And in my mind, I'm looking at it like this. I'm looking at, can I get that vessel out of this log? And I want enough room left to create a lid for it. They call them a finial, but finial or lid, you know, your choice in words. Do I want to create a top for that? Now, a lot of times I'm doing this on a lathe. It's not hand carving anymore. But the weed pot itself, it's still hand carving, because you can use Forstner bits, spade bits. There's a multitude of things you can use to drill a hole down through this. Just like this. And hollow out some of that. Okay, now on a wood lathe, of course I can come in and I can hollow out a lot more. Okay, depends on the tools that you have, depends on whether or not you have a lathe, but you can still make weed pots. And I've made a few of these and sold them to this lady, where I drill a hole down through there, and then that's it, and then I finish the outside. And she puts decorative dry flowers with a little peat moss and stuff in there and stuff. And she resells them. I've talked about that in my, my past videos. So those things are possible. I keep moving this around to try to get the light reflection off of the board. So you can do those. You can make money doing that. It is possible. I mean, so those are other thoughts that I go through. Now, before I conclude this part of it, don't worry about failing and screwing up. Okay, when you fail and screw up, just stop and study and think about what you did. What went wrong, okay? And I mentioned this in my videos, because getting really good at this, it's about experience in doing it and spending the time to learn things that you can't read on the web, or things that you can't see on YouTube. There's little quirky things that you're going to learn to do and not do, and ways to do things that it's easy to tell somebody and it's a little bit harder to do. But the more you experience doing these things, and you're going to screw up, okay, get over it. I have a designer wood pile out back, okay. I still have failed projects. So some of the videos that we do, I show you when they fail. It's just part of the process, okay? But then you get good at it, and then you start making money at it, and you start feeling better about it, and you buy more tools, and you keep getting better, and your skill level keeps getting up. So don't give up on something you really want to do, or you want to enjoy, or at least you want to try. The Cutsall and the Warrior brand discs. The Cutsall is expensive, Warrior brand's cheap. I mean, go out and get the Warrior brand ones. You can get the chainsaw cutting one, and you can get, you know, the first course disc out at Harbor Freight. They're good. I use them all the time. I think they're great. In spite of all the negative comments that people have made, they're expecting it to do miracles on wood. But the coarse bit, I mean, takes that bark off and starts shaping that wood down like fast. I mean, and it's a good one, and I believe it's carbide. And I would tell you, go out and try it on your 4.5-inch angle grinder. It's not that expensive. Put it on, grab a log, start carving into it, and see if you like doing it. All right, so these are my quick steps when I first start thinking about these projects. How do I prepare the wood? What do I do? And what do I go through? These are the basics. If you have a question, drop it in the comment below. If you've got a better way of doing it, of course, always drop a comment. Let me know, because I'm always game to learn other ways of doing things. You know, I've already showed you, I mean, basically how we do this. There is one more thing I want to show you before we conclude. Here's an actual little piece of a branch, and I'm going to use this as an example instead of the dry erase board. So here it is. There's the pith where that red dot is, and I drew a circle around there. That's the heartwood. You can see it's a different color than the rest of the wood as you work your way to the outside bark. So here it is on one side, and let's go over to the other side here. Here's the other side of the wood. There's the pith. Now let's say this is a much bigger piece of wood and you're going to cut it to make a bowl. I would line up my chainsaw like I was showing you on the photograph on one side. Let's see if you can see that. There's the center line of where that pith would be if I cut it with my chainsaw right there. But now I go to the other side. And I mark it on the other side. Now, if I'm not going to carve this right away, like I said, and I want to coat it and seal it, and I want to put it away for a while, I will run my chainsaw at this angle like that. And then I've had people argue with me, well, you should just cut it straight down the middle. Well, if you do, you're going to end up with the pith still in part of the wood, and it's going to crack on you for sure. I'm trying to minimize it now. Out of this, I might get only 1/2 of this will work out good for a bowl. It may be a bigger bowl and a deeper bowl because of the angle, you know, of cutting this to get that pith out of here, okay? That's the way that I do it. If you do it differently, I think that's fine. This is what works. It works for me, and I have a proven track record of it working, and that's the reason why I continue to do it that way. I cut it. Once it's cut, I seal the end grain. If it bothers you that the long grain is exposed, or you think that there's something that the temperature's not going to be quite right where you're stocking them, go ahead and put anchor seal or Elmer's glue on the long grain. Now, the long grain, of course, is all of this right here, the side grain, long grain. I coat the whole thing. It's not going to hurt anything. As long as you don't seal it with saran wrap, that's not good, because I think you're going to induce, you know, probably some kind of a fungus, or I just wouldn't do it that way. That's like totally encapsulating it, trying to make it airtight. I don't want it airtight. I want to slow it way down. So it's not going to hurt you to use Elmer's glue or anchor seal and paint those open areas. Okay, that's it for this video. I'm the Home Handyman. I hope you click subscribe. Continue to follow me. Drop a comment below. I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.